We must defend the truth at all costs, even if we return to being only 12. Saint John Paul II.
The spiritual journey is full of challenges and mysteries, and few figures in the history of the Catholic Church have explored these paths as deeply as St. John of the Cross. Amid his mystical experiences and profound reflections, he offers us a guide through the shadows and lights of spiritual life. In this video, we will delve into the life, teachings, and philosophy of this great mystic, with a special focus on the dark night of the soul. Let's discover how his teachings can help us find light in our own darkness. Chapter 1. Biography of St. John of the Cross. St. John of the Cross, born Juan de Yepes Alvarez on June 24, 1542, in Fontiveros, Spain, had a childhood marked by hardships and difficulties. After the early death of his father, his mother, Catalina, struggled to support the family. From a young age, John demonstrated a deep spiritual inclination, recognized for his piety and intelligence. His devotion led him to enroll in a Jesuit school, where he received solid spiritual and academic formation. In 1563, John joined the Carmelite order, adopting the religious name John of St. Matthias. His vocation to religious life was marked by a desire to seek spiritual perfection and serve God in a radical way. Shortly afterward, he met St. Teresa of Avila, who was also dedicated to reforming the Carmelite order. Inspired by Teresa's determination and holiness, John changed his name to John of the Cross and decided to join her in the reform. Together, they founded the Discalced Carmelites, promoting a life of greater austerity, contemplation, and strict observance of monastic rules. However, this reform met with great resistance from the more traditional members of the order, leading to John of the Cross's imprisonment in 1577. He was held in extremely harsh conditions in a dark and solitary cell in the convent of Toledo, where he suffered hunger, cold, and total isolation. During the 9 months of his imprisonment, John of the Cross composed some of his most profound poetic works, including parts of The Dark Night of the Soul. Despite the adverse conditions, he remained steadfast in his faith and continued to cultivate his inner life. His miraculous escape from prison marked a turning point in his life, allowing him to continue the reform and expand the Discalced Carmelite movement throughout Spain. The last years of his life were dedicated to writing, spiritual direction, and founding new convents. On December 14, 1591, St. John of the Cross passed away in Ubeda, Spain, at the age of 49. His spiritual legacy is immense, being recognized as one of the greatest mystics of the Catholic Church and a doctor of the Church. His works continue to inspire and guide Christians around the world, especially those seeking a deeper union with God. Chapter 2. The Dark Night of the Soul. The Dark Night of the Soul is one of the most profound and mystical concepts developed by St. John of the Cross. This term describes a period of intense spiritual purification, where the soul is led on a journey through apparent darkness, during which God seems absent. This experience is crucial for the soul's inner transformation, as it is gradually purified of all its imperfections and worldly attachments. The dark night is not a punishment, but a necessary path to achieving a more intimate union with God. This spiritual journey is divided into 2 main phases: the night of the senses and the night of the spirit. The night of the senses is the first stage, where the soul begins to withdraw from sensory pleasures and earthly comforts. God withdraws spiritual consolations, forcing the soul to rely solely on faith, even when it does not feel His presence. The night of the spirit is a deeper phase, where purification reaches the core of being, eliminating selfishness and more subtle spiritual imperfections. This process is painful, but through it, the soul is prepared for full communion with God. During the dark night, the soul experiences a profound sense of abandonment and loneliness. What was once a source of comfort and security now seems distant and inaccessible. This state of spiritual desolation can be so intense that the person feels lost, without direction and without hope. However, St. John of the Cross teaches that this darkness is temporary, and that at the end of this process, the soul will emerge renewed, illuminated by divine light. The dark night is also an invitation to total detachment and absolute trust in God. It is in this moment of apparent helplessness that the soul learns to completely surrender to the divine will, trusting that, even in darkness, God is present and silently working. This trust and total surrender are essential for the soul to traverse the dark night and reach the light on the other side. The dark night is not a final destination, but a preparatory path to a mystical union with God. St. John of the Cross shows us that by facing this darkness with faith and patience, the soul is purified and becomes worthy of experiencing divine love in its fullness. At the end of this journey, the soul not only finds the peace and joy it seeks, but also a deep intimacy with God, where the darkness is finally dispelled by eternal light. 3 other works of St. John of the Cross. In addition to The Dark Night of the Soul, St. John of the Cross wrote other works that are equally fundamental to understanding his mystical spirituality. One of his most well-known works is The Ascent of Mount Carmel, which can be seen as a practical manual for the spiritual journey toward union with God. In this work, St. John describes in detail the challenges the soul faces as it tries to detach from everything that is not God, comparing this journey to the difficult ascent of a steep mountain. He emphasizes that to reach the summit, that is, perfect union with God, the soul must renounce all earthly desires, trusting completely in divine providence. Another essential work by St. John of the Cross is Spiritual Canticle, one of the most beautiful expressions of mystical poetry in Christian literature. In this work, he narrates the dialogue between the soul, which is compared to a bride, and Christ, the divine bridegroom. Through deeply symbolic and poetic language, Spiritual Canticle explores the soul's ardent desire for God and the joy of mystical union that, after a long search and purification, is finally achieved. The work is inspired by the Song of Songs from the Bible and reflects the deep and unconditional love between the soul and God. Living Flame of Love is another important work by St. John of the Cross, which deals with the final stage of mystical union with God. In this poem and its commentary, he compares divine love to a living flame that sweetly and transformatively consumes the soul. Unlike the darkness and suffering described in The Dark Night of the Soul, Living Flame of Love speaks of a deep and serene joy, where the soul, now purified, burns with the love of God. This love is so powerful and pure that it becomes a complete union, where the soul lives in perfect harmony with the divine will. These works of St. John of the Cross are not only theological treatises, but also practical guides for those who wish to deepen their spiritual life. They offer a clear and detailed path to achieving holiness and union with God, based on a life of prayer, detachment, and total trust in divine providence. Each work complements the others, forming a body of teaching that continues to inspire and guide Christians around the world. The richness of St. John of the Cross's works lies in their ability to communicate profound spiritual truths through poetic and accessible language. His writings invite readers to a personal journey of self-knowledge and spiritual growth, showing that true happiness can only be found in God. By studying these works, we are challenged to look beyond appearances and seek a life centered on God, where every suffering and sacrifice becomes a step toward communion with divine love. Chapter 4. Prayer to St. John of the Cross. This prayer is often recited by those who face their own dark nights of the soul, moments when God's presence seems distant and faith is tested to the extreme. O glorious St. John of the Cross, mystical doctor of the Church, who passed through the dark night of the soul and reached the sublime union with God, intercede for us, so that in our own difficulties and trials we may be strengthened by divine grace and find the light that guides us to true peace. Amen. Chapter 5. Applying the philosophy of St. John of the Cross in today's world, the philosophy of St. John of the Cross, particularly his view on the dark night of the soul, has much to offer for the spiritual and emotional challenges we face today. In a world full of uncertainties, crises, and social pressures, his lessons on detachment, trust in God, and the purification of the soul are more relevant than ever. St. John teaches us that moments of darkness and confusion can be understood as necessary stages on the path to a deeper and more meaningful spiritual life. In the current context, the dark night may manifest in various ways: mental health issues, financial difficulties, family crises, or a sense of existential emptiness, even when material success is achieved. St. John of the Cross encourages us to see these experiences not as punishments or failures, but as opportunities for spiritual growth and transformation. By abandoning our dependence on earthly comforts and securities, we are called to trust fully in divine providence. even when we cannot see or feel God's presence. For example, consider someone facing unexpected unemployment. The loss of work can trigger a crisis of identity, financial insecurity, and even despair. Using the philosophy of St. John of the Cross, this person can begin to see this trial as a moment of purification, where they are challenged to rethink their priorities, detach from material dependence, and trust more deeply in God. The dark night in this context becomes an opportunity to reassess life, strengthen faith, and open up to new paths that God may be preparing. Moreover, St. John of the Cross teaches the importance of accepting trials with patience and faith, without trying to avoid suffering at all costs. In a world that often seeks quick fixes for discomfort, St. John's message reminds us that true spiritual growth requires perseverance and a willingness to face and overcome difficulties. The serene acceptance of the dark night as part of the divine plan allows us to emerge stronger, with renewed faith and closer proximity to God. By applying the philosophy of St. John of the Cross in today's world, we are called to live more deeply and intentionally, recognizing that every difficulty and every suffering can be paths to greater communion with the divine. In a world full of distractions and superficialities, St. John's teachings invite us to seek a rich inner life, where temporary darkness is just a prelude to the eternal light of union with God. St. John of the Cross left us a spiritual legacy that transcends the centuries, offering a path to union with God through purification and unwavering trust. By applying his lessons to everyday challenges, we find not only comfort, but also an opportunity for spiritual growth. If this content touched your heart, consider becoming a channel member to continue exploring the depth of Catholic spirituality and strengthen your faith journey. And don't forget to check out our next video, where we continue the spiritual journey with the lives and teachings of saints and Catholic traditions. May St. John of the Cross intercede for us all, guiding us in the darkness to eternal light.